Hi everyone, my name is Orlando Sanchez. I'm a student at UNAD University, and this is a presentation for our last phase in materials design, which is this subject. Okay, this presentation is intended to give some tips for creating some listening and speaking materials, which can be very useful in our process as future teachers. Basically, I'm going to talk about listening, some tips for listening and speaking. I have three objectives. The main one is to create interactive teaching material to strengthen students' learning process. Secondly, to show the importance of knowing the different aspects necessary for creating listening and speaking material. And finally, to show the relation between listening and speaking learning English. Let's start with listening materials. Um, okay, listening, first of all, is a receptive skill. Traditionally, speaking, it's more emphasized than listening. But um, with the emergence of comprehension approach and natural approach, we have given more attention to listening. These approaches put their emphasis on oral perception than more on perception than production. And from here, we have different classifications that have been developed for listening practice. According to Nation and Newton 2009, we distinguish two broad types of listening. We have one-way listening and two-way listening. The first one-way listening, is considered as a transactional listening, and a two-way listening and interactional listening. Okay, and coming from this info, I'm going to give you five things which maybe we have to take into account when creating material for listening. Okay, here we talk about different phases. We have intensive listening, selective listening, extensive listening, responsive listening, and interactive listening. Let's start with intensive listening. Intensive listening focuses on such elements as phonology, syntax, and lexis. When you talk about intensive listening, we can talk about dictation, elicit repetition, error spotting, and simultaneous interpretation as well. Then we have selective listening. Here, learners should be asked to listen for something like people's names, dates, certain facts, events, for example, location, situation, context, main ideas, conclusion of what they're listening, and those kind of things. Then we have extensive listening, which aims to develop global understanding of spoken language. Here, learners are expected to reach full comprehension during extensive listening by listening to lengthy lectures or conversations or broadcasts. Okay, according to Ware in 2010, the extensive listening is appropriate for all learners at intermediate and advanced levels. So it is more recommended for intermediate and advanced. Okay, here we can talk about watching movies, listening to radio programs, watching podcasts, listening to podcasts. It could be digital or maybe an audio file. Listening to songs, music is something that people like a lot here in Colombia. Listening to interviews, listening to lectures. Okay. Then we have responsive listening, which is used to elicit immediate response. Here, when we talk about responsive listening, um, let's talk about some examples. Okay, here we can ask questions. It's just info that we do during the class. We give commands. We seek for clarification, and we check comprehension. According to Brown 2001, in this way, um, seven, I think seven, yeah, seven suggestions comes from it. Okay, something like listen to a conversation. Conversation may be formed from a textbook supplement, maybe a radio broadcast, maybe guest speakers, or possible technologies suggested for this type of listening include CDs, maybe a web audio site, audio conferencing, teacher prompts. I mean, there's a lot of information that we can use, even face-to-face classes or digital classes. Okay. Here, of course, we can listen to presentations. Those presentations may be live or recorded by using presentation softwares like this one, for example. Listening to stories, those stories may be audiobooks, CDs, web, or even podcasts. Finally, we have interactive listening, which is listening in collaborative conversation. As it says, interactive is just to interact. It's the interaction while we are learning English. Interaction between with different aspects. Could be teacher students, student teachers, or the whole class on it. Okay. Let's go on speaking material. Um, First, I would like to say that there's a misconception about this terminology. Because, for instance, people think that if learners are using English words and sentences in the classroom when they are developing speaking skills, that's something pretty good and it's working. But no, we have to take into account that speaking is a complex mental process because, as Level in 1999 points out, it involves four separate sub speaking processes. Conceptualization, for example, is one, formulation, it's another one, articulation, and self monitoring. So, conceptualization involves generating the content the speaker wishes to express. Formulation entails selecting the language to express the content generated and organize it according to the norms of a particular genre. Articulation is the physical production of the sounds required to encode the message. And while all of these things are happening, the speaker has to self monitor the process to ensure that he or she is producing the intended message. But that's a lot to do at once. Okay? And here we talk about three different phases. We have the pre-task phase, and post-task phase. The pre-task phase, it's when learners are presented essential vocabulary, phases or grammar for the activity. In the pre-task phase, it is, of course, I repeat, vocabulary, the introduction of vocabulary. It's fundamental because it gives confidence to students, and that way students are going to understand better and they're going to gain confidence when starting with the topic that you have ready for your class. Then we have the task phase. Learners carry out the task in groups, most of all, okay, most of all. In the task phase, in some contexts, it might be possible for the teacher to record the activity. That's something good for the class in this phase, and that's something good for our next phase, which is the post-task phase. In this post-task phase, activities that help learners notice grammar and pronunciation after completing fluency-oriented activities. Learners can be asked maybe to prepare an oral or written summary of the task or to perform the task in front of the class. This phase may involve the teacher giving feedback on language used during the activity. I think it's something very good. Actually, I have the experience, and in my experience, it has been something great, and it encourages students to continue learning because when you listen to your mistakes, somehow, I don't know, it helps a lot to think about it and to improve. to improve more. Okay. For conclusions, designing listening material taking into account our different phases is fundamental for a successful learning process. Secondly, it is important to take into account different aspects also related to emotions. I mean, that's something that I have to say too. When you prepare a speaking class, speaking material, you have to take into account that it's not only the cognitive part, it is also the emotion part of the student, because sometimes students don't participate not because they don't know, it's because maybe they feel scared or ashamed or something like that. And then listening is as important as speaking when learning a second language. That's why it has to be used a lot when preparing a lesson plan. Here we can watch the references for this presentation. And okay, not being anything else, I just want to say thank you and I hope you like this video. Thanks.